and Planning Commission. Hope you're all doing well. Looks like you are. Let's see, two items on tonight's agenda, and I think we're going to flip one of them here. First up will be finalization to the PC and Historic Preservation Board's character statement for Main Street and Alamo Avenue. And then we'll do the heavy duty one second. That'll be phase 2 amendment draft to our existing zoning code. So we'll get started. Does staff want to make a presentation? Let me give the official here. ID 20-183, finalization of Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Board's character statement for Main Street and Alamo Avenue. Does staff wish to make any type of presentation?
Just a verbal one, nothing formal. So the character statement that you have before you that has both black line and red lines, the red lines are clarifications that staff added to this. So after you all had finished the character statement, when staff started to take a look at it and see, okay, how do we incorporate this when we get to the ULUC? So we do need to do a little reminder again that this will really help inform the Historic Preservation Code that will be part of our ULUC. It also will be huge in getting us a little bit further on actually doing a preservation plan for downtown that will be after the ULUC. But really our focus right now with the phase 2 stuff is on downtown and really making sure that our existing code, which is not fantastic, but at least we can put some Band-Aids on it and have that code help us guide downtown development over the next 15 months until we get to the final ULUC. So when staff kind of took a look at this and, all right, how can this be integrated? We just felt like there was some clarifications that needed to be done. That going to one of the comments that Bazad made was, is there more in here that we can grab onto that actually start to codify? So that's why you see the red lines before you on that. And we wanted to bring it back to you to just make sure that we didn't change any intent of the document. So in talking to Mark Rindicke, we thought we would give this item, 30 minutes. We can walk through it, or, if anyone has any overarching concerns, just raise them. But we wanted to just bring this back to you and make sure we hadn't changed the intent. So, Andrea, do you have anything to add to that? I've caught her off guard. She's multitasking. So when she comes back on.
Here I am.
Are you there? Okay.
So
do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so we got some comments from staff, and one of the comments we got from a couple people was actually organization. And so that's one of the things that you'll see on the red lines here, that there is more of a, I guess, kind of an introduction here, and then there are 3 bullet points that get at what is to come within the document. And one of the other pieces that we also added was a focus more directly on Alamo Street and Alamo Avenue. And before, I think we were calling it a downtown character statement, but in reality, the tours and what we were really looking at were more focused really on Main and Alamo Street, and we wanted to clarify that. That's what I have to add.
Okay.
Can everyone see the statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question and a comment about this. I was surprised and quite frankly disappointed to learn that this character statement has not been sent to the consultants and it has not been disseminated in any way. And I'm looking at the date, June 22nd. We worked very hard to get this done and submitted to the consultants by July 1st. At least we thought that's what was going to happen, and it didn't happen. And now here it is at the end of July. And I would like to fully understand what is the city's intent for this character statement? And, you know, quite frankly, why are we discussing it further?
Okay.
By the way, we can see your screen and what you're typing.
Thank you. So, and I'm going to have Kathleen jump in here too. So a big reason, again, for the clarification and staff going in this, that it is ultimately when this gets part of the ULUC, again, it's part of the ULUC, not the code changes. Now, that is not to say that you guys can't use this statement and what's in here for your personal comments in responding to the phase 2. But the content of this and the intent of this is to inform the historic preservation code, which is not part of our phase 2 discussion. It's also to help with a future preservation plan. Again, not part of the phase 2 discussion. So that would be a big reason that they have not seen it in its entirety. Kathleen, did they get a draft of this?
So they have not received the final draft of this. They're very aware of the work that's being done and sort of the intent of the document. But until it was finalized and this conversation happened, we have not shared that with them. I don't think that the timing is at all in question in terms of incorporating this into the future work with the ULUC. So I think that we're still fine in terms of sharing this with Candid Keystone. It's still having the impact that you had intended. So I don't think that there should be any concern about the timing from.
Let me jump in a second. This is going to be this little discussion is going to be a little more informal, so anybody can speak up. When we get to the phase 2 land use or unified land use code, we're going to be fairly much more strict and go right down the line one by one. So anybody, Kimberly, you have any other questions?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I do.
I do.
I mean, I agree with Kim, and I think we need to share this with the consultants. They just don't understand. I mean, this is just not for 2 streets. I mean, this kind of looks at the whole downtown as far as a character. One of the ideas behind this was try to solve the small town character definition that nobody can ever get their hands on. And I think this document did a good job outlining what makes a small town, but it is way beyond Main Street and Alamo Street, particularly take into the DMU zone that's to the south, going down to Church Street, as we do redevelopment there. But one thing that bugs me is that when we read the revisions to the code, then they make statements that go against what we just came up with. And so we end up repeating over and over to the consultants who really don't understand the city as intimately as we do as citizens. They're not taking this into consideration.
Rick,
So we absolutely will be sharing this statement with them as part of your feedback on the phase 2. Well, absolutely, this statement will go to them. What they do with that, I don't think you'll see it until the ULUC.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it. But I do want to say I like the clarifications and editing that the staff did. I think it flows really nicely. I would like to see the community character elements re-included in it, though, Jennifer. Those are the ULI. That's the ULI statement for how you define a downtown area or a character area. I took those right off the ULC website.
So which part are you referring to? Oh, the community character element?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Because a lot of people think it's all about architecture, but it's very clear from their definitions, architecture is only a supporting aspect of what defines a character of a space. If you don't have people, you don't have any character, and that's why the social elements are so big there. And
And
if the public were, I mean, if the citizens of Littleton were to see this, they might understand it a little bit better, how this came about, and understand more about what defines character than whatever we think it is, small town, whatever we define in the envision plan.
And I think our intent on staff was that these elements were basically integrated into the introduction and other parts of this statement, but not called out individually. So I think if you're going to do something about these community character elements.
Yeah, I saw some incorporation of a few of these things, but like with the whole when we're talking about the whole downtown, it's different zones. Define, I mean, the entryways was mentioned in the revised phase 2 code stuff that I saw, but a lot of this is a little bit broader than just 2 streets.
I just had an idea, Rick, and I wonder if this might help out. To me, the character elements didn't fit because the rest of it is really wording and text and ideas and everything else that the board came up with. And then this was this piece that was different.
Guidance. Yeah, it was guidance.
And so I'm wondering if there might be a way to create an introduction, and not at the beginning of this document, but a separate page that comes first that talks about the overall character, the character project that that was done, and talks about the tours that were done and how these community character elements were talked about during that tour. And these were the things that that participants were asked to observe and to comment on as kind of a way of setting the stage for what's to come. How do you feel about that?
I think that would be okay. And I think tying it to the general public statements from the first division, the comp plan, from the comp plan, tying it into the comp plan, how people defined our community. Because I mean, this is leading to helping people understand how the community is defined, except the broad, this is a small town feel, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I think we are jumping the gun here. This is like a mission statement. This is basically defining a guideline of what we like to see in the code. So to go any further and basically expand on this, I think it's inappropriate at this time. I think this should be provided to the consultant. From this, they have basically just of what the community want to see in the code. Then when the code comes in, we can make comments, add to or subtract from them to meet the spirit of this document. I think this document is basically a overarching everything basically of the downtown. What the definition is, what are the things that are important, and so forth. So to go at this point, nuts and bolts, I think is waste of time. We need to see what the consultant come with and then interject what we see is missing back into it.
Well, I don't want to keep telling consultant what they're not seeing because it just goes over and over again.
Yeah.
And that gets very tiring when you keep repeating things over and over again to the consultants. So they could know the vision beforehand. It would help when they do their writing.
Yeah, they need to understand what they're doing beforehand, not come back and have to redo it because they didn't understand.
No. I mean, this Jennifer or Andrea or whoever is in charge of the consultant need to sit down with them with this memo and explain to them. I mean, you can write books and expand. It still doesn't mean that consultant gonna basically put everything in. So I understand the frustration, but I think someone need to sit with the consultant, go over bullet by bullet of this item. As I said, this is the roadmap. Now, if you want us to write the code, that's another story. You don't want to write the codes. There's a consultant that's doing that. So my opinion is let's work and polish this document, give it to the consultant, and basically hold him his feet to the fire to deliver what we want to see. And maybe you need, Rick, you need to emphasize what you like to see from the consultant.
Well, I would also like the citizens of Littleton to see what we came up with so they have a better understanding of what's downtown too.
Yeah, given, yeah.
And I think if just our citizens read this, they would begin to start understanding what really makes a downtown area, because they're not as educated as we are, particularly when you look at what's just happened on Main Street, closing it up and having a restaurant spill out onto the street. I mean, that fits right into the character we're defining. I mean, I'm always thinking in terms of how can we get more people involved and understand so that when we get further down the line with this, people don't come out of woodwork because they haven't been participants.
No, once this finalized, I think it should be posted and everybody should comment on it. I mean, that's given.
Okay.
Let's get some other opinion. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, just get a clarification on a couple of things and make a comment on one thing, if that's okay. On page 2 under Alamo Avenue to Littles Creek, the third.
And I'm trying to reshare. Go ahead, keep talking. I'm trying to reshare.
The third bullet point says, whenever possible and as a last resort, preserve historically significant building. Is that what we want to say? As a last resort? We don't want historical buildings saved?
Yeah, I saw that too, and I thought we could reword it. Whenever possible and as a last resort or something like that, preserve at least the facades of historically significant buildings. Maybe some tweaking on the wording.
Yeah, I mean, how about we get rid of the as a last resort?
Yeah, just keep that out.
There you go.
At a minimum, I would say.
Yeah.
Or reasonable effort should make to preserve the facade. Something like that. Reasonable effort.
Well, I think what they're trying to say is whenever possible, we're going to preserve the whole thing. But at a minimum, let's preserve the facade.
Right.
And they do that in Seattle, actually. I have a friend who does developments there, and they actually will redo the interior of a building, and they'll save the entire exterior of the building, holding it up while they redo a new building on the inside. And that, to me, I mean, we're not Seattle, but that, to me, seemed like a great way to solve a problem with wanting to preserve history, but also creating new space.
That was my comment, David. And I thought we had removed as a last resort because that defines the ending. You want to leave it broader, but it is one way of preserving character of many ways that you can do it in a community.
Yeah, it just, when I read it, I thought it meant that as a last resort, we'll preserve the historical significance of a building, but, whenever possible, we'll just destroy it. And then maybe as a last resort, we'll save it. I don't want it to say that.
No, we don't want to say that.
David.
No. We had this discussion and
you muted yourself, Sherry.
Sherry lost you.
She muted herself.
Yeah.
While Sherry finds herself again, the next bullet point down, 2 down, encourage the preservation spelled incorrectly.
Okay.
What page is that on?
That's on page, it's under Main Street pedestrian, or where is it? Alamo Avenue to Littles Creek. It's the 5th bullet point.
I think it got fixed.
The E is crossed out.
The E is crossed out.
Oh, I couldn't tell it on mine. Sorry. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't need to be capitalized, but that's kind of beside the point.
Yeah.
One of the things, this as a last resort, there was quite a bit of discussion on that in the last meeting when we came up with it. And there was one individual who was really passionate about it. who did make the case for the fact that, we don't like that. That's certainly not the way we want to go, but it's better than losing the building. So there was a lot of passion around that statement, and it was included in there. So I don't know if we want to keep it or not, but that's kind of the genesis of where that as a last resort came from.
And Kimberly, I was saying before I somehow muted myself that there was extensive conversation on that, but I do believe, as David pointed out, that it kind of says the opposite of the intent that we discussed, which is we want to preserve the building, and as a last resort, we would at least want to save the facade, right? Isn't that right? So it doesn't say that, honestly. I think it just needs to be tweaked.
I was confused. I thought it meant that as a last resort, we wanted to preserve the historical significance.
I think we just say that and then add as a last resort.
Yeah, I like that. Be specific about we want to save the building. As a last resort, we'll look at the facade, or at a minimum.
Because it makes it sound like we want to tear the building down. Okay, maybe we'll save the facade, but forget the building.
A well-placed comma could actually do that.
And there was a lot of discussion about this.
But there was a lot of discussion. You're absolutely right.
But it still isn't worded correctly, so that's all right.
Who else? Who else has some comments? Anybody?
Yeah,
I have two comments. On the first page, protect and enhance the historic character. I think that protect should be preserve, not protect.
Mm-hmm.
You don't protect buildings, you preserve them.
No, you can protect the character without preserving it.
Well, do we want to protect it or we want to preserve it? There's two different words. So I suggest preserve. Rick, if you like protect, that's fine. When you go down, also, it says relationship to Platte River and many other parks via Littleton's Creek. There are a lot of different Littleton's Creek. There's a pathway, there is the pond. So we're talking about the park. That's not clear to me, that sentence.
The creek.
Little's Creek. So it's actually a creek.
Yeah, I had the same comment. As I think there was an attempt to link the South Platte River to downtown via Little's Creek, and Little's Creek is mentioned in a lot of the character areas, but I don't see it as a significant open space, and that's something I think we can be proud of at the moment. There's other parks in downtown, so I think just adding that via Little's Creek does defeat the intent of that original bullet. So I just take that out.
I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Andrea's going to put up the Word version so we can edit.
While she's doing that, anybody else that hasn't spoken yet? Any comments?
I just had one other minor tweak, and the last bullet under the signature attributes, proximity to the transit station. I think it just could say proximity to transit. Period. I think that's just simpler. It's minor, but
I wondered too. I already spoke, but in that first paragraph, it seems that it would work if the reference just to the whole downtown area was put back in there, because currently it does just sound like this is all about Alamo and Main Street. So maybe just that intro paragraph that part could be added back in there with maybe an emphasis on the Main Street and Alamo without having to go back and redo a whole bunch of it. It just starts out that this whole thing is about Main Street and Alamo and not downtown in general. I'm just saying make some simple edits instead of rewriting the whole thing.
Okay. That was one of our questions, was the intent more surrounding Alamo and Main, especially given the conversation that council is going to have next week about expanding the Main Street district, or was all of this really meant like Main Street and Alamo is one bullet point or one section of this character statement, and the rest of it really applies to downtown. Is that
how I would view it?
Okay.
Because we have other historic property spread throughout the downtown that aren't in this area. I mean, all the houses along Prince Street, and even between Little's Creek and Church Street, there's a few buildings that could end up being landmarked if the owners want them to be, or the city wants them to be.
Okay, let me jump in with my comments. I have 3 or 4 quickly. I agree with Rick on including the community character elements, but don't have it as its own underlined heading. Just have a paragraph at the end of the introduction. We've done that elsewhere. Do it here. I don't think we need a prologue page here. Let's just not get carried away. Let's get this thing out of here. Let's see. On page 2, at the bottom, it's a paragraph dangling in the breeze. Curtis, Nevada block of Main Street is Littleton's living room. That paragraph, it's right at the tail end of the Alamo Avenue to Little's Creek. We need to move that paragraph to the end of the title, Main Street's Pedestrian Ambiance. So if you would take that paragraph and move it to the, after that 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th bullet point. And then turning underutilized features into signature spaces, 1st bullet point, encourage the activation, the 4 block, put in the word of the 4 block alley. See that?
Yeah.
Okay. And the last sentence on the last bullet point on that page, you struck out and keep the mill in its original location, which is something we wanted back in end of June. Why was that struck out?
Hang on, I'm going to take control over here. Andrea can't see it on her screen.
So, in regard to why the removing the mill in its original location was struck out, I think both staffs, or I know at least Planning Commission, is more than aware that there is a P4 process that will be coming before the commission, which relates to a development project in which that mill location may be moved forward. I believe, I don't know exactly what their current development plan is. I know that there was some movement still within that general location, obviously, but I thought it was going to come more street forward facing. So I guess in my opinion, it seemed kind of like a little bit of inside baseball to start changing up and putting conditions on a development project that you happen to have knowledge that it's coming before you in some fashion.
Rick, is this a local landmark? I assume it's not on the National Register, correct?
No.
Okay.
It's a local landmark. I didn't have a problem personally with removing that sentence because it's the only building we said downtown. But we say preserve and capitalize the view of the mill. Those words basically say you're not going to move the building. And the way I look at it, we have a whole preservation ordinance, a whole public hearing process that will review this and have comments on whatever the proposal is that's going to come in.
Okay. Well, us architects are always saying you turn, if you think it's a problem as a developer, well, you take the problem and turn it into an opportunity and work with it.
I agree. Don't single out the building, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy to move this thing.
Right.
No, and I think a lot of that in your comments will come forward during that P4 process. Obviously, that's going to come before Planning Commission and City Council and get some thoughts. And those thoughts are, gosh, if you move this 1 inch, it's going to really affect the character that we've tried so hard to define. Then, have those comments be known.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any comments?
I have a question about timing. Jennifer, you've spoken of, a phase 2. And can you give me an idea of when you anticipate sharing this with the consultants?
My intent that we will share the finalized version of this as part of the comments that staff gives back, which are the public comments as well as staff comments on the draft that is out right now. So
when will that be?
So the public comment closes on the 31st of July, and then staff will take all of those public comments and basically integrate them into a red line of the phase 2 and send that to the consultant. So my intent would be at that time, we would also share this document.
By the way, can we, when you do all the changes we talked about tonight, can we get one last final draft, let's call it, and then if anybody has any problems, they can email you and with email everybody with their suggestions. Is that possible?
I think that would be just fine. Andrea, I think we can get that incorporated here in the next 2 days and send that back out. Yes.
One last look. Kim?
Can I hate to, really hammer this, but I really would like some clarification. So that's what I thought the process was last month. I thought we had looked at the final and made the edits, and it was considered good to go. We're not going to do this again next month here.
Correct.
Sitting and looking at this again.
No.
So do you anticipate it final at the end of this week when you have made these edits and sent it around and, we say yay or nay by Friday or something like that? I would just like to, get closure on exactly when this thing is off the table and incorporated into those public comments.
So the public comments will be going back to KKC the 8th of August.
Hey, Jen, can I just hop in here?
Sure.
I think the question that you're asking is, when can we send this document? As soon as it's finalized. And the only reason the consultants don't have it is that there were these outstanding staff comments. And so the board needed to weigh in on the staff comments. If this document is finalized on Friday, we're happy to send it to Candid Keys at that point.
Well, just a second. Before our meeting started, I asked Jennifer about this, and she said that, tell me if I'm incorrect, that a rough draft of this, the rough draft that that we thought was the final draft at the end of June, was sent out. Has the consultant seen this thing at all?
No, the document, at least as project manager, the document was not finalized because of the pending staff comments. So the consultant will see this. They are familiar with the work and the effort, but they have not seen the actual wording or actual document. So they've been tracking with this process, but they'll have that once it's finalized.
All right. And this is a standalone document. It's not, it can go out ahead of time of the phase 2 comments, correct? It can go out
as soon as it's finalized, it can be in the hands of Candid Keys.
All right. So Kim, I think, is asking, give us a date. Friday, it goes out, period.
When it will be finalized. Finalized seems to be the term that we need.
Well,
so
okay.
You anticipate it being finalized.
So Mark,
yep,
the chairman of the Planning Commission, just asked for a last review. So that would be the only step that we would need to take.
Okay. So
both the Historical Preservation Board and Planning Commission would want one last look.
So we as a staff will incorporate everything that we've heard this evening. We're going to change this all to black and send it back to you. And I will make a guarantee that you will have that by the end of the day on Wednesday.
And we have 1 day to look at it. If you don't respond, it goes out Friday. Deal?
And then I'm happy to confirm that it's in the hands of Candid Keys with all members of the Planning Commission and Historical Preservation Board. So if that review and then is done on Friday, I'll transmit it to them and confirm that transmission with all of you.
Okay. So Friday, let's say Friday, it will go out. We give any last comments from HPB and Planning Commission 1 day. They got Wednesday to Thursday. There's not going to be, there's very little changes now. Maybe you can get this out tomorrow. let's get it done by the end of the week and out of here. Okay. I see Jennifer shaking her head. Yes.
On the staff part, no problem.
Yeah. Kathleen,
Up to you guys.
yeah, thumbs up. Okay, great. Let's just get it out of here.
I'm sorry to do this because we just finished that, but on page 2, can somebody remind me, did we mean to, under Alamo Avenue to Littles Creek, did we mean to call out just preserving historically significant residential buildings only? I just can't remember if that was part of the conversation. We really wanted to focus on just residential.
So Andy, are you talking about this bullet point or which one?
Sorry, I have it up on mine. Let me find it on yours. It's the 5th bullet down under Alamo Avenue to Littles Creek. What's the 5th bullet?
Encourage the preservation of historically significant residential buildings.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we called out just residential for that area.
They're mostly residential except a couple. That's
okay.
why.
Do we want to do you guys want to differentiate that?
Just get rid of the word residential, right?
Yep.
Well, there's a residential character. Almost all the buildings except the Elks basically are residential like buildings there on that street. If you think about it, as you walk down.
I couldn't remember, thank you. I couldn't remember if some of those other buildings that you showed us were historically significant or not. So thank you. That answers my question.
Yes, I recall, and I don't recall exactly how the discussion went, but there was quite a bit of discussion around that and including the word residential. And I think it was because the overall nature of Alamo was primarily residential. I think that one went into the decision.
In contrast with commercial Main Street, because they're really a high contrast between the two. That hasn't really been differentiated in downtown over the years.
Thanks for reminding me.
So, what are you going to say? Historically significant residential buildings, except for 2 buildings on Alamo Street. It gets awkward. If you've got exceptions, just say buildings.
We can't say historically significant because we haven't made that determination. So we can't use that wording right now. When we make the determination, we can change it, but we haven't officially determined them historically significant.
I think he's talking about the residential versus just buildings.
Yeah.
I'm fine leaving residential in. Thanks.
Leave it in?
I say leave it in also.
Great. Let's move on. It's small potatoes here. Anything else? Sorry to move this along. We've got to get to, we got a lot of work to do here this evening. Any other last comments? Jennifer, you got what you need now? Kathleen?
I think so. And I will re-listen to the comments because I was trying to switch to the Word document. So I don't know if we captured them all in the document itself. So I will re-listen and make sure everything's in there and do an accept change and go from there. And you'll all have this on Wednesday.
Great.
Hopefully sooner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. Good. Well, we'll move on to the next item, which is ID number 20-182, discussion on Phase 2 amendment draft. This is how we're going to proceed. This is a little more formal here. Staff will give a presentation, perhaps 15 minutes or so. They'll take. We're not going to take any comments. They're just going to go straight through their presentation. At the completion of their presentation, we'll go ahead and take questions one by one. I'll just read off names, and you'll have. We're hoping to keep it to 5 minutes each. So pick your favorite, most important topic or 2 or 3. Keep your questions brief and to the point. If you have minor questions and comments, write them down and get them to staff. We're talking about spelling, punctuation, all that good stuff. Just go ahead and write it down and send it. Staff ask that you keep your responses brief and to the point as well. Staff, if you don't have answers, just say we'll get back to you when we find out the answer to your question. When everyone has spoken, we'll go down the list again and get a last summary of your comments and your general like or dislike of the proposed amendments. Please take no more than, say, 1 minute or two with your comments. And by the way, if you don't have any comments at all, you can just say, I'm fine with the document as is. So those are our ground rules, and I'll be, like say, calling out names one by one rather than just helter-skelter here. So with that, staff, go ahead with your presentation.
Excellent. So the presentation that Andrea and I are about to give you is a presentation that our planners have put together for stakeholder groups as well as focus groups to solicit input on our code changes. So some of this will be a definite review to you, but the purpose of putting this together and trying to engage our stakeholders and focus group members was really to remind everyone that we are trying to, again, put into place everything that we've talked about in the comp plan, that we have asked for in the comp plan and are going for. We're now turning that into regulation. So we want to make sure at all times that we are incorporating the thoughts, goals, policies, actions of the comp plan in our phase 2, as well, that more on the ULUC side. So that's the purpose of this presentation. So we're going to go through it real quick. So in terms of the purpose, I kind of just said that, really an overview of the phase 2 code changes, discuss how these code changes and future code changes will meet with the city's long-term vision as established in the comp plan. We are doing short surveys during those meetings. We're not going to do that this evening. And then always encouraging participation in the phase 2 survey that's online. How many of you have had an opportunity to input any comments into that survey? Show of hands. Anyone? Excellent. Great. Thank you for doing that, and encourage your friends and family to do the same. So in terms of the overview, in the actual draft, so these are the page numbers. If you have the draft on another screen open in front of you. So purpose of map, another big part that we really took a look at was parking, lighting and rooftop equipment, and the screening and regulation of it. Also green space and tree protection. Any of you that have gotten to that part is very detailed now at this point and really stresses the importance of that downtown and that tree canopy. We also have new definitions for childcare center, as well as new sign codes specifically for downtown. And then, as you're familiar with, all of you who have participated in the Envision Studios, a lot of the building types, design, and materials that you saw in those Envision Studios are now incorporated in these phase 2, in this phase 2 draft. We have the new map that shows our downtown district. So this is being proposed as a new zoning district for downtown that has 4 different character areas. And this really came from combining our future land use map with the downtown design standard area map that we had before to get us these new character areas with the downtown Main Street, the transition areas, the downtown mixed use, as well as the downtown neighborhood residential. So as part of your comments that you do, we are looking for, what's your comfort level of these character area boundaries? Do any of them you feel need to be expanded, reduced? So please definitely comment on that.
I'll just add something here just to help clarify, because it's kind of a different concept. Previously, downtown was primarily the CA and the B2 zone, at least in the center of the football. And so these character areas really divided up much more. And so for the first time, you're seeing in the code how that is going to be relayed into zoning regulations and building types. So this is really, I think, at least a fairly large departure from what we currently have.
Yeah.
Just to point out, I think it's a typo here on the downtown transition area. I think it's DTA is what it says on the map. It just confused me at first when I noticed that. So.
Yes, we had started out as DMA and is now DTA. And I did catch a few of those in the code and reading the code, things that we started out with and have transitioned in this phase 2 process to a different symbol for that. So thank you. We will make sure we change that for future presentations. So parking. So we go into more specifics about parking in downtown, particularly. Again, these are phase 2 regarding really fixing what's going on in downtown. We start to acknowledge the transit and biking assets that we already have downtown, which our old code did not do. It better articulates shared parking requirements. There was a lot of policy going on before, or kind of unwritten interpretations of the code about shared parking requirements, but we have taken this opportunity to memorialize those ideas. And it definitely helps with meeting parking requirements when you have that shared parking opportunity. We also have introduced the concept of parking maximum, and this ensures that parking does not undermine other goals for downtown, a lot of which have that pedestrian connectivity and mobility. And then also being more specific on off-site parking. Andrea, do you have anything to add on that slide?
No, I thought that was great.
Excellent. And then in terms of lighting and rooftop equipment, we start to incorporate the idea of what it is looking like from the right-of-way, which this was a big aspect that was in the design standards. And during our phase 1, if you remember those, that really addressed the egregious misgivings of the ordinance, we started to address. So now you see those incorporated even further. We do talk about also architectural lighting and having more of a focus on what that lighting looks like to ensure that we have lighting that is appropriate to the character of downtown. And then also introducing more robust screening requirements. The green space and tree protection, as I said earlier, this is a huge addition to the code for downtown, and really talking about open space. And in the conversations we had both through the phase 1 process and now the phase 2, there's been a lot of discussion on how do we preserve our tree canopy? How do we preserve that open space that really truly gives downtown its character? So huge section that's in that as part of the supplementary standards. Really talking about the pedestrian and bicycle environment, not just the space in between buildings. We do add different open space types for plazas, pocket parks, common green, rooftop gardens, parklets, adding the concept of hardscape as well as landscaping, and then putting more details for parking areas and landscaped parking areas. Child Care Center is another one, kind of an odd one, but it's something that has come up multiple times, both in downtown as well as the rest of Littleton, removing the conditional use aspect of child care centers depending on their size. So also creates a detailed administrative review. So it removes it from conditional and becomes a P asterisk. So permitted with special administrative review. We also have design requirements that again would buffer a child care center from other uses such as a single family private residence. And this we really felt contribute to the work, play, live components of downtown to have this mix of uses downtown. In terms of the signs, we have now a very robust, detailed sign code for downtown that gives a lot clearer direction for those of us that have to enforce the sign code and also goes more, again, enhancing the character of downtown for the signs. And then we have our different building types. So we not only now will have graphics of the different building types, but we also have started to introduce the concept of photos of some of the building types. And I have already heard from a couple of you about the numbers of photos that we have, and that maybe that we don't need as many photos that are in there. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So that kind of sums up the big things that you'll see in the phase 2. And then this is just a little bit of a reminder of our adopted values. Again, our local history, the outdoors, being inclusive, being a model community, civic involvement, integrity, equality, safety. So keep those things in mind as you are going through this code. Then make sure that when we're talking about those, you start to see that. Again, these are more going to be in that ULUC, but I think we can definitely start to integrate some of them in this phase 2. So just a quick reminder, I don't know how many of you remember that this is our cover page for land use and community character in our comprehensive plan. And these are the goals that we're looking at when we're talking about the ULUC. And then we have our housing and neighborhood goals. I'm not going to read them in the essence of time.
Thank you.
And then also transportation. So if you all feel so inclined of, having the comp plan next to you as you go through this, it could be helpful. And then economy and tax pace. Again, there were several goals. And then our heritage, arts, recreation, and tourism. And obviously, this is a huge part of downtown, for sure. So that is the quick and dirty on what we have been talking about with stakeholders and focus groups. Do you guys have any questions on that? And then we'll jump into your comments.
Jennifer, Pat and I listened to one of the afternoon sessions that your staff was putting on, and we thought it went very well.
Great. Thank you for that feedback.
Which was this presentation here, basically, I believe, right? So,
any other comments about the presentation before we roll into one by one? Kim?
No, I'm just saying it was good. Good presentation.
Okay. Yeah, it was good. Well, not hearing anybody else. I'm not looking at faces here because of the what's on the screen.
I guess, Mark, if I can add what, Andrea, do you have anything else to add to the presentation? Sorry, I whipped through that pretty quickly.
Well, I thought you whipped through it quite well. Very thorough, although quick and thorough.
Well, we were told we're going to get out of here at 9 o'clock. So the over under is 9. 90% of us is over, but okay. Just a little prologue for opening this up. We're trying to add a Band-Aid to the, I call it Band-Aid on a broken arm, to the existing antiquated zoning code that we have now. So some awkwardness is as you can see, readily see, is there, and trying to mix the old and the new. It can be quite cumbersome at times and almost unreadable at times, but that will change in a year when we have a brand new unified land use code that'll roll in, obviously, most of what we're doing now. That will get rolled into one of the 4 building blocks of the new land use code. So with that, let's start with the names. Again, try to keep it to 5 minutes. I've got my watch here. So be succinct and rapid fire. We'll start with Jason.
So,
and Kim, you're up next.
Really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I'll just focus on a couple of things. I like the expansion and definitions in the parking section and talking about how certain sites can qualify for parking reductions and methods for doing that. One thing I would question is why the 20% discount only 700 feet from a light rail station when the typical walk shed, as it's called, is 1320 feet as a reasonable walking distance. Seems like the larger number would be more applicable given kind of the standards for around transit. Another thing that struck me as in reading through the parking section was that we're parking restaurants at one space per 100 square feet, which is a very suburban standard for a restaurant parking situation. That's for something that's out there in Highlands Ranch, off of Broadway, not necessarily for a downtown area. And just, I personally found the photographs to be helpful, particularly like the exhibits depicting the different types of open spaces. And that's probably less than 2 minutes, so I'm going for the under.
And as chair, I get the only person that can jump in. Currently, Littleton is for a restaurant is 1 per 65 with liquor and 1 per 75 without liquor. So
1 per 100 is what I've worked with in other suburban communities.
Yeah, but that's
without
still
downtowns.
Yeah. So we are quite a bit more restrictive than most suburban areas.
Right, and 1 per 100 is totally inappropriate for a downtown area like this.
Got it. Okay, Kim, you're up next, and Dan, you're on deck.
Okay, thank you. I don't have a lot of very specific comments, it is a pretty dense document, and kudos to everyone who made it through. But I think it's good. I was happy. But there are a few things that I'd like to throw out. First, on the photos, I like the photos, and I like plenty of them. So I would discourage you to take any of the photos out. But some of them I thought, I guess were a little confusing. I was seeing taller buildings than I think are indicated in the text. And that was kind of confusing to me. And let's see. And I also, we had talked about height and how many stories and things along those lines. And, it's almost like instead of, we're really concerned with the height and the massing of the structures, what the structures are going to be on the land, and what effect they are going to have on the surrounding community. The density of people means, more cars for parking and stuff like that. So I think that rather than focus on some of the more ambiguous things like stories, maybe we should just talk about a height cap and, massing requirements. But that was just something I was thinking about. And then also, I guess, one of my biggest concerns is the lack of the term historic or preservation in this document. I would like to see those words more often, because when it comes to downtown Littleton's character, we are talking about its historic character, and I'd like to see the word. Also, I'm seeing small town feel and character, which are really ambiguous terms, because as we've talked, everyone has their own definition of small town feel and character. And that's where I think the character statement that we've already talked about can really inform this document, to kind of take some of the squishiness out of it and create more of a common vocabulary that people would understand. And I really, I think those are, in essence, my comments. Thank you.
Staff, any response? Jennifer? Whoop.
Sorry, I'm taking notes here. I did have one question actually going back to Jason on the parking. When you say 1 per 100 to suburban for a downtown, what number would you think would be more appropriate?
Lower. Yeah, I can have a look at this document and get back to you. And I'd encourage you to use it to look at, parking requirements for multifamily within a half mile of light rail station as well. Those appeared to be overparked as well. But
are you suggesting?
Let me get back to you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I would
Roughly,
definitely.
You thinking 150, 200?
Yeah, it's something that, I'd want to look at the data and, and this is an awfully thick book. But, in general, somewhere between where it is now and where retail is would probably be appropriate for restaurant parking.
And then are you saying this is in relation to its proximity to transit or just in downtown in general?
Likely downtown in general because of, it's, once you hit the transit stop, particularly if you're going to a restaurant, Main Street's filled with restaurants all the way pretty much to Santa Fe.
Correct.
Any other comments for what Kimberly asked?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, well, I thought that, Kim, that I would, as I go through the code again, I'm going to definitely take the opportunity to see where words historic and preservation can fit into that. Generally, I've thought of those words as happening more in the historic preservation code, which is to come. But I think you're right. We need to take a look and see if there's a spot for those words in this downtown phase 2 revisions.
All right, thank you.
Good. Dan, you're up, and Amy, you're on deck.
Yeah, 3 things. And it kind of talks to this, the COA HPB review. I don't know if maybe it's just still early in the process, but when I was looking through the signage, the lighting, and the rooftop equipment section of the codes, I wasn't aware of the if you're in the Main Street area where the verbiage is to trigger a HPB review. I said maybe that's coming later, but I wasn't aware of that. I do like seeing the section on parking being expanded. It's moving us away from our auto-oriented downtown, and so I think that's a positive thing. I like seeing the bike requirements being in there. That's consistent with downtown Denver and many other communities surrounding us, that bikes are important and you need to plan for them. And then finally, I know we did some work on roof slopes in the downtown transitional or downtown neighborhood area. And I was just curious that there's a note in there that basically says see table above for roof slopes, but it really doesn't prescribe any slopes, which I think we did prescribe earlier. So I'm just curious when that will appear.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on 512 roof pitch or above, and it somehow disappeared in this document. Staff, any comments?
Yes, I think,
yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
I think that the staff has made note of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that the roof slope or the whole tie-in to signage, lighting, roof screening, and COA HPB review?
Well, I was speaking specifically about roof slopes.
Okay.
Yep. But we can look at inserting something about the need for historic preservation review for those buildings that require it. That's a good idea.
And we did notice that some of the elements that we had adopted in the phase one, some of them were missing in this. So that has been noted.
Okay. Is that it, Dan?
Yep.
Okay. Amy, you're up. Craig, you're on deck.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to say there's so much here to like about this. I enjoyed the presentation and I'm enjoying looking through the document right now. I want to dovetail onto Kim's comments though. If you see, I'm looking at the land use and community character slide, which is slide 16, I think. I'm wondering if we could pick up some of the language from the document that we worked on last meeting and earlier today and pick up a phrase or something to put in here. Because we talk a lot about being urban and walkable, but when we talk about, heritage or preservation, the only thing that we actually call out to preserve in community character is open space, not necessarily any of the other kind of characteristics that we've talked about. Let's see. I'm jumping around here, I apologize. Looking at the photos or the building types, I think it's enormously helpful actually to have these here, but gosh, these buildings are massive, aren't they? So somebody made the point earlier that we don't necessarily want to have a 5-story building downtown, but I guess this is for looking beyond that. But I do find the photos helpful. And then my last comments, scrolling ahead to, I think it's slide 20, heritage, arts, recreation, and tourism. I almost would like to change the order of the goals to match up with the acronym. So goal 2 talks about heritage, and I think that would make more sense to be goal 1 to kind of match up with the acronym. Goal 2, I don't know, that's kind of a picky point, isn't it?
So Amy, just to clarify, those are goals that are listed directly from our adopted comprehensive plan.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, to add to what Andrea and Kim had said, I think it's important to find additional ways to work in the word heritage or historical and preservation throughout.
Staff follow-up comment?
That I'll say, clarification, Amy, when you were talking at the beginning, was that in regards to building types?
At the beginning, I was talking about slide 16, I think. It was around land use and community character. Is that what you were asking about?
Specifically, how we have translated that. I kind of missed that first part. So what part of the phase 2 did you feel needed to be enhanced from that slide?
I'd like to call out, to use some of the language that we had worked on earlier this evening.
On the character statement?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, thank you. And that's it.
Anything else? Okay.
I like this document.
Let's see. Craig, you're up. Laura, you're on deck.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Well, yeah, there is a lot here. I'd like to echo everybody. Thanks to staff for putting all these red lines together. There's a lot to digest, and frankly, I haven't spent quite as much time as I need to get through it all. So I plan to spend some more time. And a lot of, from what I've seen so far, a lot of good additions to it. I love the way that the landscape components have been built out. Even getting into buffers and character zone treatments and so on. Let me see, I have 5 or 6 specific questions / comments. The first is on page 16, where we talk about overnight accommodations. It talks about hotels and motels and so on falling under that category. And then it says the Director of Community Development can define other types consistent with that. And I wonder if that's intended to include B&Bs, Airbnb type of accommodations, or does that fall under a different category?
I would say the overnight accommodations does fall under the B&B, but I do think we have a hotel and motel operation. And then, so you all are aware, we specifically made the conscious decision not to address short-term rentals or ADUs. I did see that there was one reference to ADU, but otherwise we had really taken that out for this phase 2. We will address that in ULUC, but we did not feel like the community has had enough time, we would have enough time to address that issue. So we have very specifically left that out of this phase 2. But to answer your question about the bed and breakfast, it sounds like we need to clarify if that would fall under overnight accommodations or hotel motel, that sort of thing. So
Right.
we can make that clarification.
And I was just curious about the discretion of the community development manager in defining other types under that category, if there are other types, or should it just be hotels and motel?
I would say the intent is that like bed and breakfast would fall under that, but we definitely can clarify that.
I see. Also, as I was reading through the definitions, I wondered if now that we have the new workshare space opening downtown, whether that should actually be a definition of workshare. I didn't see anything in there. I'm not sure if it needs to be defined.
That's probably not a bad idea. We did notice that we do not have a definition for mixed use, so that will be added as well, but I think workshare probably isn't a bad idea.
Getting down into the landscapes, page 60 through 68 or so, there are a number of definitions there associated with types of plantings. And there's one word there that I kind of cringe when I hear, and it's the word xeric. And it's used a lot in there. And it's one of those words that, even though it was coined by Denver Water, it's kind of fallen out of favor with some because people jump to the conclusion that it means zero and that it means nothing and it means a bunch of rocks and no water and so on. But as you know, in Colorado, any kind of landscape does need irrigation to look beautiful year round. And I prefer the terminology of low water use to xeric. And so if there's a way that we could do a search and replace and get rid of the word xeric, I'd sure appreciate it. Let's see. I had the same comment as Jason did about the proximity to light rail bonus. The 700 feet sounded, that's really 2 city blocks, and it doesn't seem very far. I know quarter mile is a normal walking distance, and I think that bonus should extend to anybody within a quarter mile of the station. Let's see. On page 74, it talked about one of the purposes of the code defined as water conservation. And there were a number of bullets there, but I thought it missed one of the important bullets. I don't have it up in front of me, so I can't remember what the other ones are, but one of the important elements of having landscaped in all non-building portions of the site is to decrease the amount of stormwater runoff, which enhances stormwater quality. So it's really not so much about water conservation as it is about water quality and stormwater management. And so whether that's an added bullet or whether that's kind of added on to the water conservation, I think it's important to mention that stormwater management is a key component of landscape.
Okay.
And then under the parking, I really appreciate the fact that bicycle parking was added. I ride my bike downtown a lot, and I can never find a place to lock my bike up. I end up locking it to either a railing or a light pole. So we need more bike parking downtown. And well, I guess that's it for now. Yeah, I guess just one question about the photos too, then the quantity of photos and diagrams within the document, even though I think it's great to have them, I thought they'd be more spread throughout the document. A lot of the sections of the document are very very narrative intensive, and then all the photos are in like one location. So hopefully as it evolves, they'll be more spread throughout the document.
Completely. Again, we have to think of we're band-aiding this code, so it doesn't flow very nicely at this point. Let's just put it that way.
There's a lot of good information in there, and thank you for that. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
All right. Any other comments for response to Craig? He's gone over his 5 minutes, but
Sorry.
We'll let it go this one time. Okay.
Stole it from Jason.
He took Jason's 3 minutes.
Oh, there you go. Oh, no borrowing somebody else's time. Yeah. Okay, Laura, you're up, followed by Robin, you're on deck.
Well, Craig could have a couple of my minutes because unfortunately, everything that I had written down, everybody's already said. I really like the photos. I wish there were more photos because I think it makes it easier, user-friendly for people who are not familiar with this kind of document. I think it makes it easier for them to relate to what's going on that page, what's being said, if there's a photo to relate to. So I would encourage us to have more photos, perhaps, or more diagrams on some of the pages. I was really happy with the tree canopy section. I think trees are really an integral part of our downtown and very important, so I really like that. And I also agree with Craig. I was really happy to see all the bicycle parking because I do believe there'll be more biking and more bicycle parking down in the downtown area in the future. So I was glad to see that we addressed that. And I do have to agree with Amy and Kim in that I don't think there's enough use of the word historical, or preservation throughout the document. And I think that if we don't get that in now, we won't get it in ever. So I think we really need to go back through and make sure that we add those words so that people know that we're serious about that. And if we have it in the document now, we can always go back from that or take it away later. But if you don't have it in now, it's really hard to add in later. So I'd really like encourage Andrea to go back through and make sure that we can add that designation or those words where we can. So that's the end of mine.
Okay. By the way, the people that come last will be first up on round 2. So to be fair, let's see, Robin, you're up, and let's see, Chris is not here. So Lisa, you're on deck.
Okay, so I start on page 56 with the definition of downtown, its purpose. It talks about that they are, the buildings are generally consist of multi-story buildings that are built to the street. But that seems more like the mixed use and the main street. It kind of doesn't incorporate the transitional and the residential. So it seems like there needs to be some tweaking there. On page 57 on the map, I think the mixed use is overused. Particularly, I'm going to point out RAP by Alamo along that west side of it. And also perhaps we need a little bit more transitional, perhaps around the residential border. On page 58, talking about the objectives under uses, it talks about this is neighborhood, the residential transitioning to more intensive non-residential uses towards the downtown core. But this is residential. It seems like we should be leaving out anything to do with transitioning. I think that's confusing. I am on for 2 for the mixed use. We only start getting into having step backs for the 4th floor, but nothing for the 3rd floor. And I know there's been lots of conversations that we want the 3rd floors to be stepped back in certain areas. That was not missing there. We already talked about not using historic preservation. I won't go into that. I have some concerns. I'm on page 60. There is a lot of things that are authorized by the community development director. And though I really appreciate, Jennifer, you were an excellent community development director. It just seems like there's going to be a lot of it's going back to you, it's going back to you, it's going back to you. I'm concerned about having so much of that in there for all those decisions being made, perhaps just by the community development director. It's on page 62 in another page, but you said you're going to remove the accessory dwellings, correct?
Correct, yes. That is on my notes that needs to come out right now.
Okay, I'll go into parking. I have a little bit of a different opinion than what some have said. We know our community is very concerned about parking, and I think there's too much reduction. What I'd really prefer to see is using the sharing that shared parking seems to be a really wonderful way to take the concerns of getting rid of too much parking versus those who think we have too much. If we can maybe marry these two things together and really start functioning on the shared parking too, so that we're not pushing one way or the other. Going to the green space, this page 75, private open space, it talks about roofs being open space. And I know we've had many conversations in Planning Commission that we don't want roofs to be labeled as open space. You also get down into the open space, just open space categories, same page, talks about roofs and balconies. Again, we've had lots of conversations. We don't think those are open space. This is general. I'm starting on page 162 here, but this is with the downtown building types, a general statement for all of them. There are no maximum heights. It's already been covered, but the PC slope statement's missing. There aren't any third story front and side setbacks like we've talked about. And when they talk about 4 stories, I think this is accidental, but inadvertently, it includes allowing 4 stories on Alamo the way it's presently written. And I don't think that's anything that we wanted to do. And then there are a few pictures that it's brought up, like the institutional parking, like institutional is a 5-story building, which is not allowed there. Parking shows a 4-story parking structure when it only says 3 in the chart. So there are confusions with the picture and what's allowed. And I think that's what I've got for this. I do have one at the bottom. Excuse me, I'm just scrolling through my notes here. So the last one is page 236, and this talks about the views. So I think we need to define what a partial view is and who decides what that is. And we have some example of views, but who's going to decide what makes a view or where does that come in? It's really very nebulous here, and I think that could cause a lot of problems in the future. And my last is a question. So we are eventually going to get rid of the downtown design standards and design standards at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
That is occurring now.
Okay, so there's some things that were just decided not too long ago about prohibiting slot homes. We made the definition of what a slot home is and the definitions of courtyard, passageway, and porch. Those will eventually make their way into here?
Yes, and that goes back to that many of our phase 1 code changes did not make it in here. Again, some of those were initially in the design standards because we amended those. So yes, we need to make sure that those get integrated into this.
Okay, sorry for the rapid fire, but I only had 5 minutes.
No, you did great, Robin.
You were loaded for bear, Robin. My God.
No, just got 5 minutes. I'm obedient, Mark.
My compliments. Okay, Dave, you're up, and Lisa, you're on deck. Or I'm sorry, Lisa, you're up, and Dave, you're on deck.
Oh, way to make me just sweat bullets all of a sudden. Just kidding.
All right. So I really want to go back and support Jason's original point about the parking. When I went through it, I thought that the parking requirements seemed extremely high for what we're saying the objectives are for this area. And we've already talked about the reasons for that with the proximity to transit and the fact that it's a downtown area. But from a preservation perspective, I think that forcing development to incorporate tons of parking into their building designs is going to inherently be at odds with preserving the historic character of the downtown that we've worked so hard to describe and build a code that is able to support and support that. So I also think that lots of times throughout this document in the objectives and in the comp plan, we talk about Littleton wanting diverse housing options. And I think that there's been plenty of studies that show how expensive building parking is, or including parking in buildings is. And so I think that having this high of requirements is going to limit the ability to achieve our goals of diverse housing types. I do like that there are reductions available and that there's kind of a suite of or a menu reduction options for people, but I definitely agree with what others have said about the transit proximity reduction of only 700 feet being much too small, and I really would support a much larger longer distance for that reduction to apply. Also, while I completely support maximum parking requirements, I think that they're only going to be effective if your parking minimum isn't already egregiously high. So I can't really imagine that with the price of parking in a building that anyone is ever going to hit that maximum. I do appreciate the parking screening requirements. That's something that really stuck to me on the tours that we did. Just the areas where parking is not screened and how that really impacts the environment. And I want to agree. Oh, and also I really like the bike parking that's included as well. And then finally, I just want to agree that I think that the character statement that we all worked on together, that we talked about earlier today, should be incorporated as much as possible. It was definitely my understanding from the last meeting that that was why we were making that document, was for that statement to be included in this change, not the ULUC, to be included in this one. Pretty disappointed that that wasn't included in time. And I think that that absolutely needs to be included because we've all spent a lot of time crafting that, and it needs to be put into this phase 2 part. And that's it. Thanks.
Any response, staff?
Noted.
Good enough. Okay. Dave, you're up, followed by, let's see, Sarah's not here, so it'll be Rick. You're on deck.
All right. I don't have a lot of specific comments either, and I also echo that most of my comments were already made, but I'll still just put my 2 cents in. I really like the document. It's very dense, obviously. I would like to see more photos, as many as or diagrams, as many as you can put in there. There's a lot of pages where there's nothing, and it's tedious to read it. And photos just break it up really well, and diagrams and give it a nice visual flair. I also like the bicycle parking. Obviously, this isn't the place for it, but I'll stand on my pedestal and say I'd like to see more bike lanes and wayfinding and that sort of thing. But that's obviously not in this document really. But also the parking, I noticed that too, that 700 feet is pretty short. What I'd like to see, ideally, for me at least, is maybe increasing that 700 feet to 1,500 feet, and then even further than that, maybe having a phased reduction in credits or phased increase in parking, rather than here's your delineation for no parking or limited parking, and then all of a sudden you got to have a lot of parking. I think, especially within a half mile or so of the light rail, more people are going to be utilizing that, at least once it gets going again. So I'd like to see that. I'm kind of a proponent for less parking downtown. Love to see a parking structure across the highway, and have people walk in more. And maybe we could close Main Street and have it pedestrian. Just kidding.
No, you're not.
I'm not really, but that is obviously impossible. But the document itself, I guess I didn't see if there was a low res version. Is that easy? If I were to go to Envision Littleton, can I get just a PDF or a non-media heavy document? Because it's pretty slow to change pages. Is that possible? I mean, is that in there right now, or is this the only view I've got?
In terms of online, that is the only one that we have. Okay. We do have a PDF of it. Kathleen, you want to weigh in on that thing?
You know, part of our challenge is making the document ADA accessible, which is why we're using the PDF reader.
Right.
So, but I'm happy to provide that PDF copy.
I just mean for people who are going in to look at it, if they have a slow connection, it's really going to be tedious trying to get from page to page. On my connection, which is pretty good, it's pretty slow. The other thing is when I'm looking at this document, I don't really know where I'm at, especially if I'm doing a search, because it encroaches on the side panel there that shows where I'm at. And then if I try to put my mouse over the top of the section, it comes out, but it only comes out so far, so you can't really see the whole section of where you are, where you're going. So I'd love to see some headers on top, just kind of like books do, like maybe the name of the document on one side, and then the chapter on the next page, or something like that. And then the little pullouts, when you do a hover over, I'd like to see those come further out so I could see the whole thing. Right now I see chapter 9, plan development, Y. There's no, whatever word is under after development, I can't see it. So I have no idea unless I click there where I'm going to go. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
Or
I will share this, part of our challenge with these phase 2 amendments is that we're still working in a PDF, which will no longer be part of the process once we move into the ULUC. We're actually using a software that takes the code and makes it almost like a living website. So that'll be a huge advantage when we're doing reviews of the Unified Land Use Code. But as we're on this sort of detour of doing these phase 2 amendments, we're kind of working through having this as a PDF, making it ADA accessible. But I do have a PDF version. I have shared that with members of the community that have come to me and said, the reader doesn't really work for me. So I've, shared that with them. So for anyone that may be listening this evening and wanting to just flip through that PDF, please just reach out to me. The email address was in the presentation, but it's kosher@littletongov.org.
Okay, so I guess I'm talking about the reader and the fact that the little pullouts, you know what I'm talking about, on the side, where if I hover my mouse over, it slides out. Is nobody else looking at that? Am I confused?
Yeah, I see it. I mean, some of it is cut off. Basically, those tabs are the chapters.
Right, but I can't see them all, and I'd like to be able to see the whole thing. If I'm trying to navigate through this, especially as a citizen, I want to be able to look at it and say, oh yeah, I'm going to chapter 7, site development, and chapter 6, floodplain something. I can't read that. Chapter 9 is plan development something. I don't know what that is unless I click on it, and then I have to go there, back. And then on the other side, when I do a search, that's obscured. I can't see it. And I don't know where I'm at. So I'd like to see headers on the top of each page saying where I'm at. Am I confusing people? I mean, I'm getting some strange looks, especially from Jennifer.
No, I understand what you're saying. So, but I'm thinking probably this is something for when we have the final version out there and have it in this e-reader that we can work with KKC and see if we can spread out those tabs. I think that basically that's what has to happen, is they need to be spread out some more.
Yeah, but
I'll
you
reach out
people to review this document?
Right, I'll reach out tonight and see if we can get those tabs so that they're more legible.
I thought I got an email from Envision Littleton inviting people to look at this draft.
Yes.
Everyone.
The public comment period ends on Friday at 5 p.m.
Right, so that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I want people who come here to be able to see where they're at and where they're going. I can't tell where I'm going. It doesn't matter for me, but when other people come to this site, it should be accessible. It should be easy to read. They should know where they're at. I mean, already it's super dense. So, who's going to read it? I mean, unless you don't want people to read it, that's okay too.
That's exactly the opposite of what we want.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can get those taps fixed. That's the first time that
I've heard that comment.
That concern. So let's see if we can get it fixed ASAP.
All right. I guess that's those are all my comments. Thanks.
So, David, just to respond to that, when you talk about, having more graphics and stuff like that, when we get to the ULUC, you will definitely have a lot more graphics. It will flow better.
Oh, yeah,
as Kathleen said, we're going to have it in that website. I do think there's an opportunity to put in a few here in this phase, but you will definitely have that in the ULUC.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm not saying, you got to throw a bunch of photos in right now. I'm more concerned about the readability for the average citizen who comes in here and can't navigate or has a hard time navigating because they can't, and they just give up because it's too dense. They can't see where they're going. They, see things at a glance. I think that's important just for readability for people who are, especially people who don't look at this stuff all the time. They come and think, oh yeah, I'll take a look at it. They invited me, and then it's hard to read, and then they're just like, forget it.
That's great feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Rick, you're up. Behzad, you're on deck.
So I think the solution to this for the next week with David's comments is get the PDF online, because I did get a copy of the PDF from Kathleen earlier in the month. And it is a lot easier to read it when you have that PDF, because you can really scroll fast through the document instead of trying to do it live online. This has some suggestions for getting historic preservation into this document. On 10.2.18 on purpose, where it talks about downtown, we should just add the words maintaining its distinctive character at the end of that statement. That's on page 56. When we get to the DMU definition, which is section B, we talk about mixed uses which complements Main Street. Let's add and Alamo Avenue. Most of downtown looks more like Alamo Avenue than it does Main Street. Main Street's primarily a commercial street.
Rick, which reference was that?
Section B, Character District 2 DMU. You have these, I sent these comments in already to Jennifer. You have
great.
Yeah, you
Perfect.
got them all. So I'm just reiterating. On section B, Character District 3, the DMS, Downtown Main Street, it says it establishes a small town feel. Well, we don't like that word small town, but Main Street is a commercial street. It is not a residential street, and it doesn't represent the entire downtown area. So we need to differentiate that it's a commercial street, Main Street, not the whole downtown. On parking requirements, it states 300 square feet per gross floor area. 30% of a building is unusable space. That's what's called the tear. And if we did 300 square feet per net use, we could reduce the parking without having an impact on the overall size of the building. When you add up all the walls, the elevator corridors, utility corridors, stairwells, those are unusable spaces as far as how people use those spaces. And the average is about 30% on a building. So that's something that the codes always do. Gross is just way too much for how many people are actually able to use a building. I'm going to just talk about some other things I haven't heard. Light fixtures and building lighting. And this is item F, called building lighting. One of the issues with lighting is if you see the light bulb, it is very difficult to see around you. Your eyes focus on the light. So if there were a way the code could state that all lighting needs to be designed so you cannot see the light fixture. Just light the ground. Do not light areas off your property. If you did that, you'd have very good lighting around the city, and you wouldn't be affecting people's eyesight. Anyone goes outside at night, look at a bright bulb, and then turn sideways and look, and you won't be able to see a thing. It's a common thing. It's very difficult in lighting. In signs, we talk about LED signs. LED signs are really just big lights, and they're way too bright for the community. And anyone who's seen an LED light, I mean, it just blasts you. A good example is the one on the jewelry building at the corner of Broadway and Bellevue. If you're there at nighttime and look at that light, you cannot see anything else around you. So we need to treat these LED signs as lights and reduce the amount of foot candles coming off these lights. Let's see. On sign illumination standards, they talk about glare. Glare is very difficult to define for anyone. Depending upon your eyesight, you're going to see things very differently. So I don't think talking about glare is a very good way to determine how you're going to light a space. You need to look more at the fixture and reducing the amount of light shining from that fixture out to your face and off the property line. Lighting is I have a big issue with lighting because we have way too many lights in the city. And then foot candles, they talk about lighting in terms of foot candles. What does that really mean? 25 foot candles. For where, how far is it spread out? I think we need to define that more, because if we don't, then we end up with these pack lights. You could put one light in the parking lot to still get the 25 foot candles, but it creates an awful glaring issue besides just being ugly and lighting up the entire neighborhood. And then as far as all the other comments everyone's made, I'm in agreement with them as well. That's good.
Any comments to Rick's technical questions and comments?
I have those noted.
Okay. Behzad, you're up next, followed by Andy.
Thank you, everybody. I think this is a very complete document. I had a couple of specific items and then a couple of general items. I think everybody talked about parking, and if I remember correctly, one of the sessions that we had was regarding parking intensity or number of parking and so forth in one of our previous discussion, and also the size of parking. I didn't see those in here. Maybe I missed it, but I think we should incorporate the decision we made, and I think we voted on those. So maybe those should be considered to be included in this. The discussion of mixed use, very briefly, but we do not talk about what the mixed use compatible is. For example, can office and manufacturing and apartment be in the same building? So mixed use, typically the codes that I work with, different cities, they define mixed use, compatible mixed use. So what those compatibilities are. A lot of the pictures and sketches and so forth are guidelines. So they kind of say rather than shall and should, or a standard or a specification or regulation, which is title of this document, they say may use this. Well, that's a guidelines. If you are providing architectural design guidelines, you should have a section that say architectural design guidelines. Do not mix guidelines with the standards and regulation. Regulation is a legal document that I have as an engineer or Mark as an architect need to rely on, that be clear, that say, for example, height of the building is 30 feet maximum, written in stone. I cannot change that anymore. That's a regulation. Okay. When you're talking about some of the stuff that are more guidelines that the design should include this and so forth, I will separate those and put them in a architectural guidelines or design guidelines and so forth. Because really those are recommendations to architects to consider those. I don't know how you can enforce those, like the human element or a space and so forth. They are not really regulation. They are more judgment of each person. So that's one of my biggest thing is with a lot of people that write regulation and standards, they bring a lot of vague stuff that then the director and the staff have to, in each case, make judgment call, and that bypass basically the will of the community and will of the people, because there is no procedure for those to go through public hearing. So individual within the staff can decide, yeah, this one is ambiguous, we decide this way. And I like to, in this, there is a lot of example of those, and I like to clear those. There are a lot of authorities given to director of planning. Jennifer, I think you are a capable person. I don't have any dispute about that, but I think with the responsibility comes liability. So
trust me, when I was reading it, I had the same thought. I'm like, I want all this responsibility.
So a lot of developers, engineers, architects, they push the envelope. So we want to be clear on some of those that only 1 to 2% of those go to the director and maybe public hearing to follow. Because they are vague areas or gray areas. I think when it's good idea that you're putting a lot of pictures and photos and graphs, but typically good regulation cite those photographs and say how do they comply or not comply. So just inserting picture without citing them in your documents, to me, doesn't have added value. You need to say why. Does it meet? Doesn't meet? What are you enforcing? What is the regulation that photo showing me? I think these are my personal opinion, so don't I don't want you to think I'm nitpicking or anything. The other thing that I had some heartburn is regarding the type of material that we approve or be endorsing in this document. Some of those material, in my opinion, need to be discussed as a minimum and before we recommend those or endorse them by this document. Let me see. I think that was just of my comments. I think there are a lot of different wording and grammatical and so forth, and English is my second language, but I picked on those. So I think other people can probably correct those better than I do. So that was just of my recommendations and comments.
Thank you. Staff, anything to add?
Staff has had a similar observation that there's a lot of may, should, some. What does some mean? What does traditional mean? How do we basically regulate the word traditional? So we have made those comments as well.
Yeah, and Mark, I just wanted to share with everyone that PDF version is now on the website. It's on the Reader's Guide page. So you can download the PDF or you can access it through the PDF reader.
Thank you.
Andy, you're up, followed by Sherry.
Thanks. So most of my comments have already been covered. Parking, it's just, it's essential for business survival to not have lots of parking spaces, even though that seems counterintuitive. So I'm not going to rehash all those, but most of the rest that I have are really more small, minor, or question form to staff. So I'll throw that out to them later. But one that I just haven't had a chance to think through because it was just occurred to me as we're thinking about all these issues today. And when we talked earlier in the meeting about our statement, I'm just wondering, I don't remember seeing anything in here about protecting Little's Creek, and that's in this district, right?
Yes.
So I don't remember seeing anything about, and I'm wondering if there's any appetite for, I'll say requiring any landowners that are redeveloping along that Little's Creek to provide access for the residents or customers to that space. If we're serious about more biking, then that's how you do it. You have to make sure that people are not putting their backs to those spaces, but really bringing them into using and accessing those spaces like paths and bike trails and things like that. And I know Frisco and some other communities have done that, and I think it's worked really well for them.
Yeah.
Is that already in there? I just didn't see.
It is not coming to the top of my mind, and I have read this, so that means to me it isn't standing out enough if it is in there.
Well, I don't know what the group thinks, but I just want to throw that out there.
Good phrase. Don't turn your back to Little's Creek. Okay, like that. Who did I say? Well, Sherry, you're up next, followed by David.
I agree with Little's Creek. We talked about that extensively on the walking tour that I was on, about trying to encourage development toward the creek, and then better utilization of the creek for recreation and all that. So second that one. But my main comments are around page 67, number 5, vehicle parking credits and reductions. I'm all for trying to find ways to minimize parking, but in here, I don't see how some of these recommendations could possibly be, I don't want to use the word enforced or monitored or whatever, but yes, in a way, because they relate to the applicant. And, you know, the only way some of these can apply is if a building, it seems to me, a new building is being proposed, and then those restrictions those trade-offs are being made with the developer. So I'm not sure how you would, or how we would get a developer, for example, to guarantee that they'll have bus passes for every office and worker in the building. So it seems to me these are a little ambiguous right now. I think the concept's good, but how does this work? So that whole section on 67, number 5, is a big question mark to me. And really, those are my comments. Everybody covered everything.
David, you're up next. Followed by Bruce.
Yeah, mute myself there. Sorry about that. I think reiterate a lot of my comments have already been mentioned or discussed to quite some extent. A few that I feel are just important to reiterate. Robin, I think some of your comments around the view corridors, it's a great thing to have in our code sections. But I think there needs to be some refinement around there as well. I think everyone's been commenting about parking. I agree. Reducing the parking helps for historic structures and just be able to utilize those buildings as we would intend. Some of that could also be considered with some of the distances for off-street parking and shared parking distance requirements. Maybe there's some flexibility in expanding some of those. I think lastly, the only other big thing to kind of reiterate David's point about just usability, having a document that can be downloaded PDF, but also having links to all the different reference code sections and reference tables helps you speed through and identify the specifics about your particular site or zone district. That's all I got.
Okay. Any comment, staff?
I think, again, when we get into the full ULUC and it being in the new software called Encode, it's going to be so much easier.
Yes.
For readability as well as editability, because that software also will give us and the public the ability to edit right into the document.
Perfect. Okay. Bruce, followed by me.
Well, I'm going to be brief. I agreed with a lot of what Dave, well, frankly, I've agreed pretty much everybody's covered everything that I had any material comments on, so I won't bother reiterating them, but I thought David had some excellent comments, with the exception of turning Main Street into a pedestrian mall. But other than that, well done. I think it's a very comprehensive document. It's impressive to go through. And the other observation I wanted to make is you look at who's in our meeting here and who's been working on this thing. and you've got a group of literally citizen volunteers. Staff, you guys are doing a great job in terms of your profession. I think, Jennifer, as you indicated, and it's a daytime job. But then the group of folks here on both HPB and Planning Commission, citizen volunteers digging into this thing, and the quality of the comments. I'm sitting here listening to all this, and I think it's just literally awe-inspiring that the community has got this level of resource committed to doing the right thing for the community. And it's to me, it's fascinating to see functionally play out this way. So I just wanted to not only congratulate staff, but say thanks to the rest of the team members here just for all the effort, and it's a fabulous outcome watching this thing coalesce. I don't have anything else, Mark, that would be of material value add, so I'm going to defer to you.
Okay. Again, if you have other questions, comments, always write them down and send them to staff. Let's see, I just have 3 or 4 items. Doesn't look like residential is permitted in the downtown Main Street district. Obviously, residential is a viable alternative on upper stories. So that needs to be clarified. It looked like residential was not permitted in the use tables. You covered the 512 roof pitch that disappeared from our discussions a few months back, and a lot of the work we put in. I'd like to see that back in. Parking, I just want to make let everybody know quickly what's going on here, because I compared the new parking proposed with the existing. Multifamily new is one space per 1 bedroom, 2 spaces for 2 bedroom, 3 spaces for 3 bedroom and up. The current code is 1.5 spaces per unit, whether it has 1 bedroom or 5. Mixed use, 1 space per unit is proposed, regardless of number of bedrooms. I kind of wonder about that, why mixed use gets the doesn't need more parking. Office office proposed is 1 per 500. Existing, it's 1 per 300. Retail, 1 per 500. Existing, it's 1 per 200. For bulk merchandise, it's 1 per 300. So some of these are fairly substantial changes here that we might want to look at a little bit further. I could see perhaps upping the square footage per vehicle required, maybe not to the extent here. Let's see, restaurant we already covered. 1 per 100 is proposed, where existing is 1 per 65 or 1 per 75 with a liquor license. The main concern I have is with the building heights. As an architect, you go to the code, you skip all kinds of stuff, and you get immediately to that one page that lists the heights, setbacks, open space requirement, lot coverage, bulk plane, all of these good things. One page. Here, it's hard to find, but when I did find it, it measures the height of the building per floor, and it talks about minimum floor to floor heights. And it does not list any maximum building height. It's a real concern. Take, for instance, the current R5 area that would now be the, what would be called, the DNR area. Currently, the R5 area is 30-foot height limit. If I go by minimum standards floor to floor, well, okay, I could say the first floor has got a 14-foot floor to floor. And then I add 12 feet on the second floor, and then that third level, that's 75% of the upper, story and a half, 2 story and a half, that could be 10 foot. I could get up into if you add in the roof peak, roof slope, I could have a 45 foot building in that former R5 area. This is extremely dangerous. I could see somebody with a little single story bungalow, all of a sudden, instead of a 30-foot building going in next to him, it's got a 45-foot building next to him. We need maximum building heights. Now, I've never heard of this floor to floor type of calculation with actually no limit. If I wanted a 20-foot floor to floor, I could do it. You couldn't stop me. So that needs to be radically changed. me, I'm the one that asked for less photos. We've got 76 pages here of what do we call it? Supplemental standards. It's God knows too long. Just some careful editing, getting rid of a partial, like one paragraph on a page, or getting rid of a few photographs, condensing it, editing it. You could get rid of 10 to 15 pages of this 76 page supplemental standard. So I'm hoping that we can make this less cumbersome. My worry is that when we start doing the other 3 building blocks, we're going to have an 800 page unified land use code, which would be just preposterous. So those are my main comments. Let's see. I don't know if I'd like staff to respond to the height issue that I brought up.
So I think there's kind of 2 schools of thought on the height. Now with the regulations that we've put in with buffer zones, step backs, if you're next to a character or a sensitive area, it starts stepping back. So really above 2 stories. So, I mean, your 2-story, could be 20, 30 feet. Anything above that has to start stepping back. So you're not going to have the massive 40-foot solid wall next to something now. But you are not the only groups that we've heard from about the maximum height.
It's not just a side issue. You look at the front facade, you're going to see the full 40 to 45 foot height because of the peak roof, with a gable. And, and then, right, like I say, the normal for that area, formerly R5, is 30 feet. You can do this, apply the same principles to the commercial areas, the mixed use area, which right now is called CA, and it has a 40-foot height limit. You could get into 50, 55-foot 4-story, 60-foot 4-story buildings. When you're only dealing with minimum floor to floor, you got to get rid of that minimum floor to floor. It makes no sense to me at all. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then 5 minutes exactly, we're going to reassemble for any last comments. If you've already spoken your piece, say so. We'll move on to the next speaker. I think Bruce did his summary already. So let's take 5 minutes, freshen up, and we'll get summations in, and perhaps we can finish by 9 o'clock. Jennifer's very happy.
Mark,
Yep.
where in this section, what page is that building floor to floor information on? I can't find it.
It's in the supplementary conditions.
And it's in a table.
Yeah.
Hang on.
What threw me is I saw the floor to floor, and it's like 10 feet. And I go, oh, that's kind of small. That includes the floor structure itself. But then I saw abbreviated the word minimum, minimum. I'm like, oh my God, where'd that come from?
I made a note on page, I thought it was on 163, so it might be in that vicinity.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in all the charts for each of the building types under the building height and upper story step back sections.
167.
Oh, okay. All right. I found it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's on all the charts.
Okay.
It's dangerous. Okay, let's take our break, and we'll come back in 5. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back for final comments. Again, if you've already said your piece, say so, and we'll move on. Just make a minute or so, and we'll go in reverse order. Behzad, I had you out of order, so you're going to be fairly soon here. We'll start with me. Just general comments. The less parking we require of developers, the more the city will need to supply additional parking eventually. Somebody mentioned a parking garage. Yes, I think the number of let's see, square footage per car requirement could go up, which means less cars. But I think we're going a little overboard here. Downtown supplemental standards I mentioned before, I think are too long. They need to be condensed. Some of the photos taken out. It's in need of editing. And my main point was as I think we have a cocktail mix here, I call it, to ensure much higher, denser development. That is the less parking requirement and more height allowed. Add those two, and every project in downtown will be the maximum height of 4 stories. And as I mentioned before, 4 stories could be 65 feet where currently 40 foot is permitted. So what's kept Littleton, downtown Littleton, dense development at bay is the 2 items of parking height limits, and the third is also the size of the lots. Are fairly small lots in downtown, so unless you do a lot of assemblage, it's hard to do a big dense building. Last comment is, and I think everybody would agree with this document needs more editing to be done. It does have a whiff of from our consultants of a standard template of this is what's done elsewhere. We're going to do it here. I always say that any document after the initial submittal from the consultant needs to be Littletonized, and this is no different. That's my comments. Who's up next? David, you're up. David from HPB. Is he with us?
Thank you, Mark.
There he is.
Okay. I think the last comment I had, something you had mentioned previously about trying to find all the dispersed pieces of information throughout this document can be tiring. It's grown. It's become a more complex process, obviously. So our old documents of a single chapter per zone district just aren't in existence anymore. However, I have seen other communities provide a 1-page summary for each, say, zone, district, or use type. And that might be something that might be helpful to look at creating perhaps as a supplemental that could be published on website outside of this ULC.
Okay. Let's see. Behzad, you're up next.
Yeah, there was a comment made by staff that concerned me, that I think when Mark asked why some of the recommendations or discussion was not included in this document, was other people made comment. So are those written somewhere? Who made those comments? Were the developers, council person, and so forth? Because I think some of the regulations are changed to be more favorable to development than before. And I wanted to see and understand the sources for those changes, especially after the Planning Commission worked very hard on a lot of the concerns that we have, height of the building, number of parking, so forth and so on. So with that, I leave it there.
Okay. Andy, you're up, followed by Bruce.
I don't have any additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, I think you were right. I think I jumped the gun and gave concluding remarks previously, so I'll let them stand.
Mr. Brevity now. Great. Love it. Okay. Rick.
Just 2 things on definitions. There is no definition for sustainable or sustainability in the code right now. I think we probably should add that. And then the definition for family calls for two-parent family. I think we probably should use a more modern definition that's out there now than this old definition.
I'm gonna have Reed, because we've gone back and forth on this of like, what's the legality of us even having the definition of family in here? And then I had the question of what's the difference between family and household living?
Yeah, I know. I think we got to look at that very carefully. There's a lot of
Reed, do you wanna-
non-two-parent families in the city.
And it does kind of allude to that, but Reed, do you want to make a comment on that?
No.
Well, there you go.
I
It's a
don't
hot
like
potato.
I don't like the definition that we currently have of family. I will tell you that, yeah, times have changed since that definition kind of came into a lot of municipalities' codes. And I will tell you, even Denver was even more restrictive. I think they just changed theirs recently, but theirs used to be no more than two unrelated persons living together. And obviously, times have changed in the last 40 years since they put that in there. So yeah, something we can definitely take a look at to get a more contemporary feel on what actually living situations currently exist in today's age.
Keep in mind, our current code was mostly written when Carter was still president, and I don't think the internet or PCs existed. Sherry, you're up next.
The only thing I have to add is I think we need to make sure that we go back and look at all the things that we have discussed and approved do get into the document that are certainly relevant. Some of it not so relevant, but for example, the pitch of the roofs that we discussed, some of the parking standards, those kinds of things that we cross-check those to make sure we cover everything.
Yeah, and we did share them, so I am not sure what happened. And we, as staff, had noticed that prior to this meeting.
I've seen this so many times where the new regime comes in, or we get a new consultant, and they just throw everything away, saying, we know what's better. They maybe cursory look at the old stuff, and the old stuff is, which I've been involved with for a long time. Some of that old stuff is damn good.
Right. And I think this is just an oversight on KKC's spot of all the changes that we were sending to them. And they weren't really involved in the phase one. We really just provided that and said, make sure it gets in the code. So I think it's simply an oversight. And actually, Kathleen has probably already resent it in the time that we have been on this call.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, and I agree with Mark in that this document has gotten extremely unwieldy and long. So if there are ways we could pare that down, that would be a wonderful thing. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, you're up.
I don't have any additional comments, but I did have one question. I'm just kind of curious how the public response has been, like if there's been a lot of surveys completed, because as many of us have said, the document is pretty unwieldy, and the survey doesn't ask many yielding questions or many questions that would tell someone from the public what they were supposed to be looking out for. So I'm just curious because, as somebody mentioned, looking at this document, we're all pretty informed. It's still pretty unwieldy, and so yeah, I'm just curious. I know there's a few more days left, but whether there's been a good number of people that have responded so far.
Yeah, we're starting to see a little uptick in the survey responses. We currently have 11 responses. I would say from our experience with the comprehensive plan, we saw a lot of responses come in that final week. And then with the office hours, the addition of the office hours, that started a little slower and has started to pick up as well. And the survey responses there, I think we're sitting at a very similar number for that survey as well. And then I probably have a handful of emailed comments, that didn't take advantage of the survey. So I expect I'll probably see more of those this week as well.
Well, with our kind of lack of input from the public, we really need to do as a body here, Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Board staff, council, we need to do our due diligence here. Very much so.
Yeah, and it's a really challenging time to get anybody's attention about anything, especially zoning. So.
Well, look at this document for the first time. If you're not used to looking at it like some of us are, it's really daunting.
Even for those of us that look at it all the time, it's still daunting.
Yeah, and I will share that this is the most feedback we've gotten on any code amendments in recent years when we've used the tools through our Littleton plan efforts. So it's really encouraging the number of people that have spent time with the document, as opposed to we've had very minor, I mean, in comparison, right? Like minor amendments that have gone out for public comment and we've received, a handful of, 5 to 7. So it is encouraging on that front, but it is, it's a different animal than the number of comments that we received on something like the comprehensive plan or even the vision. It is different beast for sure.
Okay. Let's see. Planning Commissioner Dave, you're up.
Fantastic. I agree with Mark that I guess I just have 3 points to make. First of all, I agree with Mark that we should really lock down the heights because we definitely don't want to have buildings that are 40, 50 feet tall if that's allowed. However, I disagree with Mark. Hey, Mark, let me ask you a question first. Did you print out this document to review it?
I printed out sections of it.
Okay. So I think most people won't do that. And I'm concerned primarily about the readability of this document. I'm looking at this thing online. That's where, I think I'm an old fogey, but there's a lot of younger people here that maybe they can attest to the fact that they don't print anything out. I don't print anything out. I looked at this online. I think, maybe we look at this in two ways. I mean, readability, accessibility, maybe the PDF has less photos. Maybe you have an option to collapse photos. But looking at this page after page after page after page of just text, dense, heavy text, and without the benefit of some of these great draft red lines to break it up, it's just really tough to read. Now, so I'm in favor of more photos. I'm in favor of breaking it up, making it look better. If you're reading it online and you have a good table of contents and you can see where you're at and you can see where you're going, length doesn't make any difference. I mean, 76 pages versus 66 pages, I mean, that's no difference at all in my mind. It's still a big, thick piece of paper if you're going to print it out. Most people won't do that. So I'm hugely in favor of having more diagrams, more photos, visual, to give the reader who doesn't want to, power through. I mean, most people don't even read books anymore rather than, look at a dense piece of documentation like this with a lot of technical writing in it. It's just, we want to make this successful to people. In my mind, and I'm not talking about developers who should be able to read it. I'm talking about people who are, just an average citizen who wants to see, oh, this project is coming through. What does the zoning say about it? And not nobody, but a lot of people are going to be just turned off by the way it looks now versus if it has less photos.
So you definitely need to remind people this is not the final thing. Again, this is just putting a Band-Aid on our existing code.
Sure.
Trust me when I say the ULUC is going to be much more user-friendly and easier to read.
Okay, I that's great, but Mark here is saying less photos. That to me says less user-friendly. So that's all I'm saying. And I'm not trying to beat you down, Mark. I'm just saying that's my preference.
No, it's just the length of the document can be daunting. I could have all the pretty pictures in the world. I've seen some of these documents that they're mostly pretty pictures. They have no content, and they pass as codes.
You can't argue that we have no content here.
No, I agree.
But I'm just talking about strategically. I mean, it doesn't have to be filled with photos. I just mean to strategically break it up and maybe have some visual representations where it makes sense, and just improving the readability so people looking at it aren't turned off, I guess, because we want people to be attracted to it, not put off by it, I guess. That's my own. And length really has nothing to do with it when you're online looking at it, and especially if you're trying to look up a specific section.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I've noted that most people are asking for more photos, so I withdraw my objection. Stick more in, Jennifer. Okay.
Jennifer,
15 examples of duplexes, because we don't know what a duplex looks like. Okay.
Well, yeah, and I think I agree with you, Mark. I don't think we should put photos gratuitously, but I think strategically placed to break it up. And maybe we could have a PDF that has no photos if somebody wants to download a light version. That's kind of what I'm getting at as far as accessibility. If somebody, a lot of people don't have a good internet connection and they want a light PDF version. And I agree with you. In that case, we should have something available to people who have limited resources that they can still have access to it easily.
And I believe Kathleen has put that PDF on the website so people can access that. Is that correct, Kathleen?
But I just like to reiterate that I think that we could have a PDF that has less structure, less photos in it if somebody needs a more accessible version. You know what I mean? A shorter version that they can download with maybe. I mean, nobody has a modem anymore, I suppose, but some people have really poor internet connections. I've heard of people driving to their school, or Starbucks, which is closed, to get their Wi-Fi from outside because they don't even have it at home. So, that's just a consideration, at least.
Okay, no, it's a good one.
Okay, thanks.
Let's move on. Laura?
Did someone mention something about increasing the DTA downtown transitional area on the map? Was it?
I believe Robin did.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
I would like to say I'd like to have that looked at also. That was something I had a question on. But other than that, nope, I'm good to go.
Okay, Robin?
I just wanted to agree with Andy and Sherry about Little's Creek. It would be great to have that more activated. And I do have a lot of concerns of the pictures that don't fit with what the description is about them. That's it.
Okay.
I have noted that.
Yes. Craig?
Yeah, I generally agree with what I've heard tonight. I like the ideas about Little's Creek as well. And Robin had also raised an issue that kind of struck chord with me before, talking about rooftop open space and publicly or privately accessible. And I went back and I started reading that. I think it's a little confusing the way that that's presented on page 75. About it's 75 item E, open space categories. It talks about permitted residential public open space, which to me doesn't sound right. If it's residential, it's more likely private open space. So I think there's a little attention that we need to pay to that. And then the question about whether rooftop gardens or rooftop terraces count as open space. If they're publicly accessible, it makes sense. If they're not, it doesn't make sense unless there's an environmental incentive that we're trying to apply here. And I haven't heard any real discussion about that. So I think that's something that I'd like to take a little closer look at. But otherwise, I'm good with what I've heard and seen.
Okay. Amy?
Come off mute. Not too much. Regarding the DTA, actually, the first thing I wrote down was to look again at the DTA. As Laura just said,
Which DTA? Because there's actually kind of like two areas of DTA.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. Well, just before you got to me, and I'm trying to find a good map. The one that's directly north of downtown. So it's kind of hemmed in by, you know, the residential
Right.
to the north, but I'm like, would it make sense to cross over? Is that Prince Street going down? It's hard to tell on the small map.
It is Prince Street, where it meets with the DMU.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't know if that's what Laura and Robin had in mind too, but
to cross over Prince Street and go
potentially, yeah.
And go how far?
Oh, please.
To be determined.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it would be south of Powers, but at least a block over.
Amy, I would like to just have you note that area of the DNR along Prince Street,
yeah,
that is the most intact street historic houses we have in downtown.
Okay.
I mean, they're all there.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay, and then regarding the length of the document itself, that's really the only material piece that I had. The rest is about the document itself. I think making it accessible is helpful, but I actually don't have a problem with the size of the document as long as you can find what you need inside the document. So the length doesn't bother me as much as the ability, whatever format it is, if it's PDF or
searchability.
Exactly. Yeah, make it searchable. Somebody had mentioned earlier the idea of doing a one-page summary, which I like a lot, as long as that summary is true to the content and doesn't construe the content differently if you're just paging through. But I do like the idea of making this an intellectually accessible to people who aren't necessarily developers. So people like me, who, you know, if I have got a question, how many chickens can I have, and can I have a rooster, like that kind of thing. Like I can find that easily.
Now, I could speak for every architect. If you have to hip hop around various areas here and there in a huge document, it just drives you crazy.
So I mean, but we're trying to do two different things with this one document, right? So we've got to try to find
this is the temporary document, but there's
Yeah.
always a danger.
Yeah.
Oh, the new document will be perfect. Well,
No, but I mean, I think we acknowledge though that the new document needs to do two different things.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dan, you're up.
You're on mute still, Dan.
There we go. So just some definition stuff. Secondary, primary streets repeated twice. I'm curious where a garden level fits into a definition of a story. I'm just thinking sort of these workarounds that I've had developer clients ask us to look at. So is a garden level that's partially exposed above grade considered a story? Denver does a pretty good job of defining a garden level. So may look at that. If we include the roof slope information that we talked about a couple sessions ago about the 512 roof occurring at primary roofs, and then secondary roofs could have a lower slope, probably need to define what primary means or secondary, or it's primary roof, secondary roof. And then in the definition on page 20 of setback, it kind of talks about things that can encroach in the setbacks. And then if you look on page 237, section C, depth of architectural details, there might be some other ones in there that would also be candidates to be able to encroach.
Dan, what was the page number? I'm sorry.
That was page 237. It's letter C, depth of architectural details. I think there's just some consistency there. You know, cornices, projected windows. That page just rattles off some things that add architectural character. And whether it gets done now, but eventually it'll probably will have some additional elements that are allowed to encroach on setbacks. Yep. I don't know if you want to clean that up now or wait till later. There's just some consistency there.
Yeah, I remember I was adamantly opposed to, let's say, window projections, bays, what have you, inside, on a 5-foot side setback. You could, and what's your definition of bay? Could a bay be 30 foot long and, be within 2 feet of your property line? You get crazy stuff.
Yeah, and sorry, I keep referring back to Denver's code. They do have, it's got to be 10 feet wide, has to be so far above the grade, cannot extend full height. I mean, they get into it about what it can be and where it can be located. It can't be located on a side setback. It could be on the rear, it could be on the front. It's just that kind of stuff that eventually I don't know if we want to do it now or later.
Okay. To be looked at by staff here in the next few days. Kim, you're up.
I just had 2 points. One of them, as far as reviewing the document and commenting online, I found it pretty difficult. I've had to, have one computer and then this computer and then this. And I've got to, put all of that online to provide my comments. And I'm just kind of calculating how much time that's going to take. But I do think, the document's very good. I agree with so many wonderful points tonight. One that I want to really stress my agreement with, and it spurred a question for me, and that was Mark's discussion about height versus stories. I do see plenty of opportunity for mischief if you just talk about stories. What we're really interested in is height, and we just need to say height. And then somebody mentioned if we are not specific about that people will just do 4 stories all across downtown. And that was a red flag to me. I think if I am correct in this document, it does say it pretty much caps building heights at 3 stories, except on the margins of downtown. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct? Or are we allowing for 4-story buildings in that downtown core?
In reading through all the charts, when it talks about the maximum number of stories, I believe it is only in the south area of town that you could possibly have 4, but for the most part, you are at 2, 2.5, or 3 right now.
About 3-story, and then right below it, and it's rather deceiving here. Then it talks about an additional.
What page are you on, Mark?
I don't know the page, but it's obviously in the supplementary standards. Every one of them, deals with heights. But anyway, it talks about the additional plate up above being set back or what have you. So to my mind, I had 3 + 1, you got a 4-story building. So the way I read it, it's 4-story period.
Well, what it says is, if you look under, and I'm on 219, Jennifer, additional, this just happens to be under the institutional, but it's the same under other buildings. A maximum of 4 stories is permitted in the DMU character area that lies between Church Avenue and Alamo Avenue and north of Berry Avenue.
Yes.
Okay. So between Church and Alamo, does that mean on the south side of Alamo, you're allowed to construct a 4-story building?
So, and that is something that needs clarification of what we meant by south side of Alamo, because we have had discussions with staff and the consultant about that, as well as, I think, Rick, you and I even had this conversation, that it's more on not abutting Alamo, but the next place that you could build, but not abutting.
So basically south of Little's Creek.
Yes, I believe so, if my geography is correct.
There was a concept put out that you could go higher stories that abut the south side of the south side Alamo properties, but you had to take extra precautions, set more setback, more steps to honor Alamo. I didn't find any of that in the code. Maybe it's buried in there, but that was a concept.
Yeah, I'm seeing the note on the institutional building type standards, but I'm looking to see if it's in the additional. Yeah, it has it on the additional office building. It has that same
It's on
note.
almost all of them, Jennifer.
Yep.
I just happened to get to that one first, but it is through, not including residential or anything like that, but otherwise it is included on all of them.
That's right, for the very specific area.
Yes.
So
yes,
what are people's thoughts on that?
On the quote I heard. The quote I heard was specific to downtown mixed use in those areas. So if there's an area classified as downtown transition area, then they wouldn't be able to use that. Yeah. So it's only the areas that are DMU and only the areas that are DMU and south of Alamo or north of, was it Berry?
Berry. Yeah, it's Berry.
Okay.
And yeah, it could be worded probably a little more clearly, but that's the message I got out of it anyway.
Jennifer, it doesn't say South Alamo Avenue. It says between Church Avenue and Alamo Avenue and north of Berry Avenue. So should South be put in there?
Correct. So that was where we needed to work with that language. So it was clear that we're not talking about immediately fronting Alamo, but south of it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, last up is Jason. You have the final say.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments tonight. One thing I didn't mention that others did was bike parking. That's a nice thing to see. And just FYI for Mr. Coronado, those wagon wheel looking things on Main Street, those are actually bike racks. You can use those to lock your bike up. It was a project of the Fine Arts Board several years ago. So go ahead and lock your bike to those. I appreciated Mr. Cronenberger's comment about basically, I've seen it in codes listed as gross leasable area as a way to measure parking for office space. You don't count the corridors or communal restrooms, you count the stuff that can actually be used. So there's a concept of gross leasable area that could maybe be looked at. There was also some mention of lighting. I'll take a closer look at that, and this could be a preview of lighting discussions for the overall code, but we should also really look at interior lights and how those affect the exteriors of the buildings. There are a few car dealerships on Broadway that are really bad examples of that. I may like their cars, but I hate their lighting. Another example is a car wash that's under construction with flashing neon lights along an entire wall aimed right at Broadway. Those are some lighting things we should be considering in the future. And if we haven't considered them downtown, we ought to do something about those. I'd encourage the design-oriented folks to have a look at the blank walls section, page 233 to 235, and wall articulation, page 227 on offer comments. Just whether those are doing enough to make sure that there's visual interest for long spans of walls. The question I always ask myself is whether the ACC building, the arts building across from the light rail station, is a successful wall along Alamo. If those had been display windows for a shopping center, it might feel a little more activated, but is that a good example to follow? And would this code allow us to do that again? And there was a question about downtown transition area. There might be some value in including the northwest corner of Prince and Powers in the downtown transition area, since that's a commercial building, it's not a residential building. And as far as the area to the south, I could be persuaded that the downtown transition area should actually be moved a little bit northwards from Little Creek to the alleyway between Alamo and Little's Creek. That would bring some of those industrial buildings into the downtown mixed area of the zoning. And I think, finally, one thing I appreciated hearing about was the connection between parking and affordability. One parking space plus the two-way drive aisle next to it is roughly the size of a studio apartment. I'd love to see space for people, not objects.
Okay. Well, many years ago, Planning Commission, we used to joke when we started our session, and this was back in the paper days, and somebody would come in, several people would come into the meetings and open up their packet for the first time, meaning they hadn't done any homework at all. This group is a far cry from that. I love working with you all. You're all well prepared. Gosh, Robin, you're thank you all for your time and your efforts, and again, keep our due diligence going, because we represent the citizens of Littleton, and along with staff and city council, we're going to hold our consultants' feet to the fire here a little bit. So any other comments? If not, we are done.
Can I make one more comment? Just about, we do have a little bit of a different schedule coming up. And Kathleen, that's under participate on the ULUC page.
Yes, it's under participate. It's under the ULC. It's that what's next.
Hang on, I'm just going to share this real quick. We'll see.
You'll find it easier under the ULUC drop-down menu, and there's a what's next.
Yeah, that's the one I have. I just have to share the right screen here. So just to kind of go over our schedule. So we will be working on combining all the public comments as well as staff comments and getting those back to KKC. I think we have set a date for ourselves of August 8th to get that back to KKC. They will do a pretty quick turnaround. And then what's the date we're hoping? I'm like looking at this going, we'll have that final draft available for the public. I think it's on the 20th. Kathleen,
so it'll be in the packet for Historic Preservation Board, which they would receive 1 week before. So it'll be on the 18th.
The 18th
of August.
Right. So that'll be live. So
the same draft that we review on the 25th with the joint leadership meeting of City Council and Planning Commission during that study session. And then Planning Commission will again have that draft as they hold their planning or public hearing on August 31st. And then the first reading on September 15th, second reading on the 22nd, or second reading on the October 6th, and the public hearing for City Council. September 22nd, just so you know, that study session will transition us into mixed use and corridor. We'll be holding our Envision Studio on the 21st of September for mixed use and corridor.
So you have some slightly different dates coming up. So thank you in advance for accommodating your schedules to allow those to happen.
And I've got some, Jennifer, I've got some comments and dates about HP stuff. We have a minute.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, so we have a meeting with City Council study session coming up August the 4th, and that is going to explore their interest in expanding or creating a new historic district along Alamo Street. And so you may be interested in following that along to see what comes out of that. And then the regular HPB meeting would be generally Monday, August the 17th. There will be the public hearing on the phase 2, of course, on August 24th. And so we're waiting to see if we will, in fact, have that August 17th regular HPB meeting. And one of the factors will probably be, is there something to discuss for the HPB board following the August 4th City Council study session on the possible expansion of Main Street District. And that's what
Kimberly, did you have something to add to that? I saw your hand up.
Yes, we'll definitely talk, Andrea. These joint meetings have been absolutely fabulous. HPB has enjoyed them very much, but we also have HPB business that we need to discuss. So we need a meeting, an HPB meeting. So we'll talk about that. So I think, you know, HPB heads up, mark your calendars, maybe 2 August meetings.
Okay.
That it?
My last thing is, for those of you that are familiar with Downtown Colorado Inc., they just today announced an upcoming speaker series on a variety of different topics that are especially relevant to these crazy times that we're living in. So I will forward that invitation that talks about those different speaker series to both Planning Commission and HPB, and I encourage you to participate in the ones that you can. That is all I have.
Okay. Seeing no hands raised for additional talk, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.